Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his cargo ship, looking out at the stars. The Stellar Dawn was not a fancy ship. It was old and made loud noises, but it got the job done. Jake had been flying cargo runs for 15 years, moving supplies from Earth to the outer colonies. It was honest work, even if it was boring most of the time. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings ahead," said Amy Foster, his second-in-command. She was young but smart, and Jake trusted her judgment. Amy pointed at her screen, which showed scattered objects floating in space. Jake walked over to look. "What is it?" "Looks like debris. A lot of it. Something big got destroyed out here." Amy's fingers moved across her controls. "Wait, there's something else. I'm picking up a life sign." Jake felt his heart speed up. Finding survivors in deep space was rare. Most of the time, when ships were destroyed, everyone died. "Where?" Amy pointed at a small dot on the screen. "There, it's weak, but it's definitely alive." "Looks like an escape pod." Jake looked at the debris field. The pieces were strange, not like any human ship he had ever seen. They were smooth and curved, almost like they had been grown instead of built. Some pieces still glowed with a soft blue light. "This isn't one of ours," Jake said quietly. "No, sir. The metal composition is completely unknown, and Captain, the energy reading suggests this technology is far more advanced than anything we have." Amy looked worried. "Maybe we should call this in and wait for the authorities." Jake thought about it. The nearest military base was 3 days away. Whoever was in that pod might not have 3 days. He had made hard choices before, and he would make them again. "No, we go get them. Prep the docking bay." Amy looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew Jake well enough not to waste time. "Yes, sir." The Stellar Dawn moved slowly through the debris field. Jake piloted the ship himself, carefully avoiding the larger pieces of wreckage. As they got closer, he could see the escape pod more clearly. It was beautiful in a strange way, like a giant crystal egg that pulsed with soft light. "Bringing it into the cargo bay now," Jake announced over the ship's speakers. The whole crew gathered to watch as the mechanical arms grabbed the pod and pulled it inside. When the bay was sealed and filled with air again, Jake and his team approached the pod. Dr. Ben Clark, their medic, carried his medical kit. The pod was warm to the touch and hummed with energy. "How do we open it?" asked Amy. Before anyone could answer, the pod began to open on its own. The top split apart like flower petals, releasing a cloud of sweet-smelling mist. Inside, they found something that made them all step back in surprise. It was a child, but not human. The being was small, maybe the size of a 10-year-old, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Their hair looked like spun silver and moved as if underwater, even though they were breathing air. Most striking were the crystal-like formations growing from their forehead and shoulders, which pulsed with the same light as their skin. The child was clearly hurt. Their breathing was shallow and dark fluid leaked from several wounds. One arm hung at a strange angle, probably broken. "My God," whispered Dr. Clark. "I've never seen anything like this." "Can you help them?" Jake asked. "I don't know. I don't know anything about their biology. I could make things worse." Jake looked down at the child. Their eyes opened for a moment, revealing irises that swirled with colors like tiny galaxies. They looked directly at Jake, and he felt something he couldn't explain. It was like the child was speaking to him without words, asking for help. "We have to try," Jake said. "Ben, do what you can. I'll help." They carefully moved the child to the medical bay. Dr. Clark ran every scan he could, but his equipment wasn't designed for alien biology. Still, he could see broken bones and internal bleeding. Whatever had happened to their ship, this child had been lucky to survive it all. Jake stayed by the child's side while Dr. Clark worked. He talked to them in a soft voice, even though he didn't know if they could understand. He told them they were safe now, that no one would hurt them. Something amazing happened. The child's condition began to improve. Not quickly, but steadily. Their breathing became stronger. The bleeding slowed and then stopped. Dr. Clark couldn't explain it, but Jake had a feeling it had something to do with the care they were giving. "It's like they respond to compassion," Dr. Clark said, amazed. "I've never seen anything like it. The more gentle we are, the faster they heal." Jake spent hours sitting with the child. He brought them water and soft food when they woke up. He showed them pictures of Earth and told them stories about his home. The child couldn't speak any language Jake knew, but they seemed to understand that he was trying to help. On the third day, the child sat up for the first time. They looked around the medical bay with curious eyes, then reached out and touched Jake's hand. When they did, Jake felt a warm sensation, like sunshine on his skin. "Thank you," the child said in perfect English, though their voice sounded like wind chimes. "You saved me." Jake was so surprised he nearly fell off his chair. "You can speak our language?" "I learn fast. Your mind taught me while you helped me." The child smiled, and their whole face lit up with that inner glow. "My name is Kira. What is yours?" Jake Morrison." "Jake Morrison," Kira repeated, as if testing how the name felt. "You are kind. Most beings would have been afraid of me. Why would I be afraid of you? You're just a kid who needed help." Kira's expression became serious. "Because I am not just any child. I am Prince Kira of the Zephyrian Empire, and you, Jake Morrison, have just saved the life of the heir to the most powerful throne in this galaxy." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors about the Zephyrian Empire, a mysterious alien civilization that controlled vast sections of space. They were said to be incredibly advanced and very dangerous. "Will your people come looking for you?" Jake asked. Kira nodded. "My mother will not stop until she finds me. She is the queen, and she has a very large fleet." The child paused, then looked worried. "Jake Morrison, I think you may be in trouble. My people do not trust other species. When they find you took care of me, they might not understand that you were helping." As if summoned by their words, Amy's voice came over the speakers, tight with fear. "Captain, you need to get to the bridge now. We have ships approaching." "Lots of them." Jake looked at Kira, who had gone very pale. Through the small window in the medical bay, Jake could see lights in the distance growing larger by the second. The Zephyrian Empire had found them. Jake ran to the bridge with Prince Kira right behind him. The view screen showed something that made his blood turn cold. Dozens of alien ships surrounded the stellar dawn. These were not like any human vessels Jake had ever seen. The ships looked alive, their hulls pulsing with the same blue light as Kira's skin. They moved through space like giant sea creatures, graceful and terrifying at the same time. "Captain, they just appeared out of nowhere," Amy said, her voice shaking. One moment space was empty, the next moment they were everywhere. The largest ship was 3 times the size of any human battleship Jake had seen. It looked like a living mountain floating in space, covered in what appeared to be breathing skin instead of metal plates. Lights ran along its surface in patterns that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. "That's the Nexus Prime," Kira said quietly. "My mother's flagship." "Your mother?" Jake asked. "Queen Lyrelei Starweaver, the ruler of the Zephyrian Empire." Kira moved closer to Jake, and he could feel the child trembling. "She will be very angry. When I disappeared, she probably thought I was dead." Before Jake could respond, the ship's communication system activated. A voice spoke in a language that sounded like music mixed with thunder. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clearly angry. "She wants to know who dares to hold her child," Kira translated. "She's demanding that you surrender immediately or be destroyed." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Amy stood at her station, trying to look brave but clearly scared. Dr. Clark had joined them and was checking his medical scanner to make sure Kira was still healthy. The rest of the crew watched their captain, waiting for orders. "Tell her we're not holding you prisoner," Jake said to Kira. "Tell her we saved your life." Kira spoke in the musical language. The response came back quickly, even angrier than before. "She doesn't believe you. She thinks you're lying to save your own lives." Kira looked up at Jake with worried eyes. "She's sending soldiers to board your ship." The stellar dawn shook as something attached to its hull. Jake heard the sound of cutting tools working on the outer door. The Zephyrians were coming whether he liked it or not. "Everyone stay calm," Jake ordered his crew. "Don't make any sudden moves. Don't touch any weapons." The airlock doors opened and Zephyrian soldiers poured onto the ship. They were tall and graceful, wearing armor that seemed to be made of the same living material as their ships. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that glowed with soft light, but Jake could see their eyes through the transparent sections. Those eyes held no warmth, only cold suspicion. Behind the soldiers came someone who could only be the queen. Lyrelei Starweaver was nearly 8 feet tall, with the same pale blue skin as her child but covered in intricate patterns that shifted and moved like tattoos made of light. Her hair flowed around her like liquid silver, and her eyes were like looking into deep space filled with stars. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, like staring at the sun. But there was something else in her presence, a sense of power so great it made the air itself feel heavy. Jake had met important people before, but this was different. This was someone who could destroy entire worlds with a word. The Queen's gaze swept across the bridge, taking in every detail. When she saw Kira, her expression changed from anger to relief, then back to suspicion. "Mother," Kira said, running to the Queen. Queen Lirale knelt down and held her child, speaking rapidly in their musical language. Jake could see her checking Kira for injuries, her hands glowing as she used some kind of scanning ability. When she was satisfied that Kira was unharmed, she stood and turned her attention to Jake. "You," she said, her English accented but perfect. "You are the one who claims to have saved my child." "I didn't claim anything," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We found Kira hurt and floating in space. We helped because it was the right thing to do." The Queen studied him with those star-filled eyes. "My child was dying. My own royal physician said the injuries were beyond healing, yet here Kira stands completely recovered. How did a primitive human accomplish what the greatest healers in my empire could not?" Jake felt anger flash through him at being called primitive, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would not help anyone. "We may not be as advanced as you, but we know how to care for someone who's hurt. Dr. Clark here did most of the medical work." The Queen's gaze shifted to Dr. Clark, who stepped forward nervously. "Your Majesty," he said, "I've never treated anyone like Kira before. I had to guess about everything. But the captain here, he seemed to know exactly what the child needed. He stayed with Kira day and night, talking and keeping them calm. That seemed to help the healing process." "Interesting," the Queen said, but her tone was still cold. "And what do you expect in return for this aid?" "Nothing," Jake said. "We don't want anything. We just want to continue on our way." The Queen laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Nothing? No species does something for nothing. You must want technology or weapons or territory." "We want to go home," Amy said from her station. "That's all." Queen Lirelai walked around the bridge, examining the human technology with obvious disdain. "Your ship is ancient. Your weapons are laughable. Your science is barely beyond stone tools." She stopped in front of Jake again. "Yet somehow you succeeded where my advanced civilization failed." Kira stepped between Jake and the Queen. "Mother, he's telling the truth. Jake Morrison and his people helped me because they are good. They asked for nothing. They just wanted me to be safe." "Silence, child. You do not understand the ways of other species." The Queen's voice was sharp, but Jake could see love in her eyes when she looked at Kira. "Adults always want something." "Then test him," Kira said boldly. "If you don't believe Jake Morrison is good, test him. But don't hurt him. He saved my life." The Queen was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally she spoke. "Very well. Jake Morrison of Earth, you have saved the life of the heir to the Zephyrian throne. This creates a life debt that cannot be ignored." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. "It means you now belong to the royal family. You will come with us to our homeworld, where you will serve as guardian protector to Prince Kira for the rest of your life." Jake felt the world spin around him. "Wait, what? I can't leave my ship, my crew, my life." "You have no choice in this matter. A life debt must be repaid. You will be given great honor and luxury, but you will never leave our service." The Queen's voice was final. "Your crew will be returned safely to human space with a warning never to speak of what they have seen." "No," Jake said firmly. "I won't abandon my people." The Queen's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could speak, Kira grabbed Jake's hand. "Please, Jake Morrison. If you don't come, my mother might decide that humans are too dangerous to leave alive. She could destroy your entire species to keep our secrets safe." Kira's voice was small and scared. "If you come with us, you can show her that humans are good. Maybe she will leave your people in peace." Jake looked around at his crew. Amy was trying not to cry. Dr. Clark looked sick. They all understood what was happening. To save humanity, Jake would have to sacrifice his freedom. "Will you promise my crew gets home safely?" Jake asked the Queen. "I give you my royal word. They will be returned unharmed." Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, he looked at his crew one last time. "Amy, you're in command now. Get everyone home." "Captain, no," Amy started to say. "That's an order," Jake said gently. "Take care of each other." The Queen gestured to her soldiers. "Prepare the transport. We return to Ethros immediately." As Jake was led away, he heard Kira whisper, "I'm sorry, Jake Morrison. I'll try to make this right." Jake looked back at his ship, at his crew, at his old life disappearing behind him. He had saved an alien child and now he would pay the price. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to turn this into something good for both their species. The Queen was watching him carefully, and Jake realized this was just the beginning. She wanted to understand humans, and he was going to be her test subject. Whether that was good or bad for humanity would depend on what she learned from him. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 3 days in their incredibly fast ships. Jake spent most of the time in a luxurious cabin that was bigger than his quarters on the stellar dawn. Everything around him seemed to be alive. The walls pulsed gently with warm light. The floor felt soft under his feet like living tissue, and the air itself seemed to respond to his presence, becoming cooler when he was warm and warmer when he was cold. Prince Kira visited him often, bringing strange but delicious food and trying to teach him basic Zephyrian words. The child seemed genuinely sorry about what had happened and worked hard to make Jake feel comfortable. "Your people don't understand life debts," Kira explained during one visit. "In our culture, when someone saves a royal life, they become part of the family forever. It's a great honor." "It doesn't feel like an honor," Jake said honestly. "It feels like being kidnapped." Kira looked sad. "I know, but maybe you can change things." "My mother is not evil, Jake Morrison. She's just scared. Our people have been hurt by other species before. She thinks protecting our secrets is the only way to keep us safe." When they finally arrived at Ethros, Jake understood why the Zephyrians felt they had something worth protecting. The planet was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Cities floated in the air like crystal dreams, connected by bridges made of solid light. Forests below glowed with bioluminescent trees that sang in the wind. Oceans sparkled with waters that seemed to hold captured starlight. The royal palace was the most magnificent structure Jake had ever imagined. It grew from the side of a floating mountain, its towers reaching toward the sky like frozen music. As their ship approached, Jake could see that the entire building was alive, breathing slowly and changing color with the rhythm of a giant heartbeat. Queen Lyrelei was waiting for them when they landed. She had changed out of her battle armor into flowing robes that moved like liquid moonlight. Beside her stood dozens of courtiers and servants, all staring at Jake with curiosity and suspicion. "Welcome to Ethros, Jake Morrison," the Queen said formally. "You are now guardian protector to Prince Kira. You will be given quarters in the royal wing, servants to attend your needs, and access to our libraries and training facilities." Jake was led through corridors that sparkled with embedded crystals. His new quarters were amazing. The rooms were huge, with windows that looked out over the floating city. Furniture grew from the floor when he needed it and sank back down when he was done. A team of alien servants bowed deeply when they met him, ready to bring him anything he desired. But Jake quickly realized the truth. He was a prisoner in a golden cage. The quarters were beautiful, but he couldn't leave without permission. Guards followed him everywhere, polite but firm. When he asked about contacting Earth, he was told that was not allowed. For the first few weeks, Jake focused on learning about Zephyrian culture and taking care of Kira. The young prince was recovering well from the injuries, but seemed to have nightmares about the ship explosion that had nearly killed them. Jake spent hours with Kira, playing simple games and telling stories from Earth. During these times, Jake noticed that Kira had incredible abilities. The child could speak to the palace's living walls, making them change color or reshape themselves. Kira could move objects without touching them and seemed to know what people were thinking. Most impressive was how Kira could make injured animals heal faster just by being near them. "How do you do all that?" Jake asked one day as they watched Kira help a wounded bird in the palace gardens. "All Zephyrians can do these things," Kira said, focused on the bird. "We're connected to the life energy that flows through everything. But most adults forget how to use it as they get older. They become too worried about power and politics. But you're a prince. Aren't you worried about those things too?" Kira looked up at Jake with those swirling galaxy eyes. "I used to be. But when I was dying in that escape pod, I realized none of that mattered. Only kindness mattered. Only wanting to help others." The bird chirped and flew away, completely healed. "You taught me that, Jake Morrison." Meanwhile, Queen Lyrelei watched Jake constantly. She would appear in his quarters without warning, asking strange questions about human history, psychology, and philosophy. She seemed particularly interested in human wars and how humans treated their enemies. "Your species fights constantly," she observed during one of these visits. "You wage war over resources, territory, even ideas. Yet you saved my child without knowing who we were or what you might gain. Explain this contradiction." Jake thought carefully before answering. Humans fight, yes, but we also help each other. Most humans would have done what I did. We don't leave children to die no matter where they come from. Even enemy children, especially enemy children. They didn't choose to be part of the war. The Queen studied him with those penetrating eyes. Fascinating. My advisors tell me humans are dangerous. That your unpredictability makes you a threat to galactic stability, but you show compassion to those who cannot help you. Maybe that's not unpredictable, Jake suggested. Maybe that's just who we are. As the weeks turned into months, Jake began to understand the Queen's real purpose. She wasn't just keeping him as payment for a life debt. She was studying him, trying to understand humanity through his actions and reactions. She presented him with complex problems and watched how he solved them differently from her own people. One day, she brought him to a room filled with holographic displays showing human colonies throughout the galaxy. Your species is expanding rapidly, she said. In a few centuries, you will encounter my empire's borders. My military advisors recommend destroying your colonies now before you become a threat. Jake felt cold fear run through him. And what do you think? I think you are more complex than my advisors understand. But I need to be certain. If I choose to let humanity live and you prove to be dangerous, the blood of my people will be on my hands. How can I prove we're not a threat? The Queen smiled, but it was not a warm expression. You will undergo trials. Tests of your character, your intelligence, your strength. Based on how you perform, I will decide the fate of your entire species. Jake realized with horror that he had become more than just a prisoner. He was now the representative of all humanity, and their survival depended on his actions. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on him. What kind of trials? He asked. That remains to be seen. But I will warn you, Jake Morrison, these tests are designed to reveal the true nature of a being. Many who attempt them do not survive. That night, as Jake lay in his luxurious bed staring out at the alien stars, Kira slipped into his room. The young prince looked worried. My mother is planning something big, Kira whispered. I heard her talking to the military commanders. They're preparing the trials of worth. What are those? Ancient tests that determine if someone is worthy to be part of our empire. They test everything: courage, wisdom, strength, honor. Kira moved closer. Jake Morrison, these trials are meant for Zephyrians. They're not designed for human biology or psychology. She might be setting you up to fail. Why would she do that? Because it would give her an excuse to eliminate humanity as a threat. Kira's eyes glowed with determination. But I won't let that happen. You saved my life. Now I'll help save yours and your species. Jake looked at this alien child who had become his friend and ally in a strange world. He realized that the fate of two species might depend on the bond they had formed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he was grateful not to face them alone. Outside his window, the floating city of Ethros glowed in the darkness, beautiful and alien. Somewhere in those crystal towers, Queen Lyrelai was planning trials that would decide if humanity lived or died. Jake closed his eyes and tried to rest, knowing that soon he would need all his strength to prove that humans deserved a place among the stars. The day of the trials arrived with great ceremony. The entire royal court gathered in the crystal amphitheater, a massive arena carved from a single living crystal that amplified sound and emotion. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the floating platforms that surrounded the central testing ground, their bioluminescent skin creating a galaxy of stars in the dimly lit space. Queen Lyrelai sat on her throne, which seemed to be made of crystallized light itself. Beside her, Prince Kira looked nervous but determined. The Queen had announced that these trials would be broadcast across the entire Zephyrian Empire, so that all her people could witness the testing of the human who had saved the royal heir. Jake Morrison of Earth, the Queen's voice rang out across the amphitheater. You will face 3 trials. The trial of mind, the trial of body, and the trial of spirit. Success in all 3 will prove that humanity deserves a place in this galaxy. Failure will demonstrate that your species is too dangerous to survive. Jake stood in the center of the arena, wearing simple clothes that Kira had chosen for him. He had refused the ceremonial armor the Queen offered, saying he wanted to face the trials as himself, not as someone pretending to be something he wasn't. I understand, Jake called back. Let's begin. The first trial materialized around him. The arena floor changed, becoming a complex maze with walls that stretched high above his head. Somewhere in the maze he could hear Kira calling for help, but this wasn't the real Kira. The Queen had explained that the trials used advanced simulations, to create realistic scenarios. The trial of mind tests your ability to think under pressure, announced the Queen. You must navigate the maze, solve its puzzles, and rescue Prince Kira before time runs out. But beware, the maze changes every few minutes and there are guardians that will try to stop you. Jake entered the maze at a run. The walls were covered with glowing symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. At the first junction, he had to choose between 3 paths. He listened carefully and followed the direction of Kira's voice. As he moved deeper into the maze, Jake encountered the guardians, floating spheres of energy that shot beams of light at him. Instead of trying to fight them, Jake studied their patrol patterns and found ways to sneak past them. When he reached dead ends, he used the symbols on the walls to unlock hidden passages. The maze was designed to test Zephyrian thinking, which focused on using their natural energy abilities to overcome obstacles. But Jake approached each problem differently. Whereas Zephyrian might use power to blast through walls, Jake found clever ways around them. Where they might use telepathy to communicate with the maze's living systems, Jake used simple observation and logic. When the maze suddenly shifted around him, rearranging itself completely, Jake didn't panic. Instead, he climbed one of the walls to get a better view of the new layout. From above, he could see patterns that weren't visible from ground level, and he quickly plotted a new route to Kira's location. He found the simulated prince trapped in a room with walls that were slowly closing in. The door was locked with a complex puzzle involving mathematical equations written in Zephyrian symbols. Jake couldn't read the symbols, but he recognized the mathematical relationships. He solved the puzzle just in time and the simulation ended. The audience murmured with surprise. Jake had completed the trial faster than most Zephyrians, but using completely different methods. Interesting, said the Queen. Your approach was unconventional, but effective. The second trial began immediately. The arena transformed into a combat zone where Jake faced 3 of the Queen's elite warriors. They were tall, graceful fighters who moved like dancers, their weapons extensions of their bodies. Each carried energy blades that could cut through almost anything. The trial of body tests your courage and fighting skill, the Queen announced. You may use any weapons you choose. Jake was offered a selection of advanced Zephyrian weapons, but he chose something simpler, a metal staff and a small shield. The warriors laughed at his primitive choices, but Jake had learned something important during his months on Ethros. Zephyrian fighting styles were beautiful and deadly, but they followed predictable patterns based on their natural grace and energy abilities. The first warrior attacked with flowing, dance-like movements, their energy blade leaving trails of light in the air. Jake didn't try to match their grace. Instead, he fought like a human, direct, practical, and unpredictable. He used the staff to block and strike, constantly changing his rhythm to disrupt his opponent's flow. When the second warrior joined the fight, Jake found himself badly outnumbered. The energy blades came at him from multiple directions, forcing him to give ground. But Jake had noticed something. The warriors were so used to fighting other Zephyrians that they expected certain responses. When Jake didn't respond as expected, they became confused. Jake began using tactics that no honorable Zephyrian would consider. He threw dirt in their eyes, used his shield as a weapon, and even pretended to be more injured than he was to create openings for attacks. The audience gasped at these dishonorable tactics, but they worked. The third warrior was the most skilled, and Jake was getting tired. His arms ached from blocking energy blades, and he had several minor cuts. But then he remembered something Kira had taught him about Zephyrian psychology. They valued balance and harmony above all else. What if he could use that against them? Instead of attacking, Jake began to defend perfectly, moving his staff and shield in patterns that created a defensive harmony. The warrior, drawn by the beauty of the pattern, began to attack in rhythm with Jake's defenses. Once the rhythm was established, Jake suddenly broke it, stepping inside the warrior's guard and using the butt of his staff to knock them unconscious. The arena fell silent. Jake had won, but not through superior strength or skill. He had won by understanding his opponents and using their own nature against them. Remarkable, the Queen said, and Jake could hear genuine surprise in her voice. You fight without honor, yet you win with wisdom. The final trial was the most dangerous. The arena became a disaster zone, a simulated city under attack with buildings collapsing and civilians in danger. Fires burned everywhere and the screams of the injured filled the air. The trial of spirit tests what you value most, the Queen announced. In this chaos, you must make choices. You can save yourself, save the maximum number of civilians, or save specific individuals who are important. Each choice reveals your true character. Jake ran into the chaos without hesitation. His first instinct was to save as many people as possible, but the trial was designed to make that impossible. Every time he saved one group, another group somewhere else was put in greater danger. He had to choose who lived and who died. The trial presented him with horrible choices. Save 10 strangers or one child? Save a group of civilians or a scientist who might find a cure for a deadly disease? Save his own life or die trying to save others who might not survive anyway? Jake realized this wasn't really about the right answers. It was about how he made the decisions. He couldn't save everyone, but he could make sure his choices were based on compassion rather than calculation. He prioritized children and the elderly, those who couldn't save themselves. He risked his own life repeatedly to give others a chance. When the simulation finally ended, Jake was exhausted and emotionally drained. He had saved many, but not all. In the real world, some of his choices would have been wrong. But he had acted from his heart, not his head. The amphitheater was completely silent. Jake looked up at Queen Lyrelei, wondering if he had passed or failed. In over 1,000 years, the Queen said slowly, no one has ever completed the trials of worth in such a manner. You solved problems through innovation rather than power. You won fights through understanding rather than strength. And you made moral choices based on compassion rather than logic. She stood from her throne, and Jake could see that her star-filled eyes were bright with unshed tears. These trials were designed to test Zephyrian virtues. You have shown me that human virtues are different but no less valuable. The Queen's voice carried across the silent amphitheater. Jake Morrison, you have proven that humanity deserves not just to survive but to be welcomed as allies. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Kira jumped down from the royal platform and ran to hug Jake, who was too surprised and relieved to do anything but hold the young prince close. But even as the crowd celebrated, Jake noticed some faces in the audience that looked angry rather than pleased. Not every Zephyrian was happy with the Queen's decision. He had won the trials, but he suspected his challenges were far from over. What happens now? Jake asked the Queen when the noise died down. Now, she said with a smile that was both beautiful and dangerous, we see if the rest of my empire agrees with my judgment. The celebration after Jake's trial victory lasted only 3 days before everything went wrong. Jake woke up to the sound of explosions echoing across the floating city of Ethros. From his window, he could see ships attacking the outer defensive platforms, their weapons lighting up the sky like deadly fireworks. Kira burst into his room, still in sleeping clothes. Jake Morrison, we have to hide. General Vex Nightbane has declared rebellion against my mother. He says she's been corrupted by human influence and is no longer fit to rule. Who is General Nightbane? Jake asked as he quickly dressed. The commander of our military forces. He's always believed that other species should serve us or be destroyed. Your trials proved that humans could be equals, and that terrifies him. Kira grabbed Jake's hand. He's coming for both of us. They ran through corridors filled with panicking palace staff. Some were loyal to the Queen, others supported the general. Jake could tell the difference by how they looked at him, some with respect, others with hatred that made his skin crawl. Queen Lyrelei met them in the throne room, now wearing battle armor that pulsed with energy. Around her stood her personal guard, but Jake could see they were badly outnumbered. Through the massive windows, rebel ships were landing in the palace courtyards. My queen, Jake said, let me help fight. This is not your battle, human, she replied, but her voice was tired. This is about the future of my empire. It's about the future of both our species, Jake corrected. If Nightbane wins, he'll destroy Earth and everyone I care about. Before the Queen could respond, the throne room doors exploded inward. General Vex Nightbane strode through the smoke, followed by dozens of rebel soldiers. The general was impressive and terrifying, nearly 9 feet tall with dark blue skin marked by scars from old battles. His eyes glowed red instead of the usual Zephyrian blue, and his presence felt like standing near a volcano. Sister, he said to the Queen, his voice like grinding stone, your madness ends here. Brother, the Queen replied sadly, I had hoped you would understand. Jake was shocked to learn they were siblings. That explained why Nightbane had the power to challenge the Queen directly. Understand what? That you would sell our empire's future for the approval of a primitive species? Nightbane's gaze fixed on Jake. This human has poisoned your mind with their weakness and sentiment. He has shown me strength I never knew existed, the Queen said firmly. Compassion is not weakness, Vex. It is the greatest power in the universe. Nightbane laughed bitterly. You sound like our father. His compassion nearly destroyed us when the Void Hunters attacked. Only strength saved our people then. The general gestured to his soldiers who raised their weapons. I challenge your right to rule, Lirelai. By ancient law, single combat will decide who leads the Empire. I accept, the Queen said without hesitation. No. Jake stepped forward. Let me fight him instead. Both Zephyrians stared at Jake as if he had gone insane. You? Nightbane laughed. You wish to die, human? I wish to prove a point, Jake said calmly. You say humans are weak and primitive. I say we're strong in ways you don't understand. If I win, you acknowledge that humans deserve to be left in peace. If you win, you can do whatever you want. Jake Morrison, no, Kira whispered. He'll kill you. Jake knelt down to Kira's level. Maybe, but if I don't try, he'll kill all humans eventually. Sometimes you have to risk everything to protect what matters. Queen Lyrele looked at Jake with something like pride. Are you certain about this? I'm certain that running away never solved anything. Nightbane considered the offer. Very well, human. When I defeat you, it will prove once and for all that your species is unworthy. We will fight with traditional weapons. No energy blades or advanced technology. Just skill and strength. The combat area was cleared and word spread quickly throughout the palace. Even in the middle of a civil war, no one wanted to miss this fight. Jake was given a simple sword and shield, while Nightbane chose a massive two-handed blade that looked like it could cut through steel. Any last words, Primitive? Nightbane asked as they faced each other. Yeah, Jake said. You're about to learn why humans survived long enough to reach the stars. The fight began with Nightbane's overhead strike that would have split Jake in half if it had connected. Jake rolled aside, feeling the wind from the blade as it smashed into the floor where he had been standing. The general was incredibly strong and fast, but Jake had learned something important during his months on Ethros. Zephyrians, even military ones, fought with a kind of beautiful precision. Their movements were graceful and elegant, even in combat. Nightbane was no exception. He was deadly, but he was also predictable. Jake fought like a human. He was scrappy, dirty, and completely unpredictable. When Nightbane expected him to retreat, Jake advanced. When the general thought he would attack high, Jake went low. Jake used every trick he had learned in years of bar fights and survival situations that no royal Zephyrian had ever experienced. But Nightbane was still bigger, stronger, and more skilled. Jake was getting cut up and pushed back. His shield was dented and his sword was chipped from blocking the general's powerful attacks. Blood ran down his arms from several wounds. You fight well for a primitive, Nightbane admitted, but you cannot win through tricks alone. You're right, Jake panted. Good thing I'm not just using tricks. Jake had been studying Nightbane's fighting style, looking for weaknesses. The general was used to opponents who tried to match his strength. But Jake had a different plan. Instead of fighting against Nightbane's power, he decided to use it. The next time Nightbane made one of his massive overhead swings, Jake didn't dodge completely. Instead, he moved just enough to avoid the blade while grabbing the general's wrists. Using Nightbane's own momentum, Jake threw him over his shoulder in a move he had learned in basic training years ago. Nightbane crashed into the wall, surprised and angry. He got up quickly, but now he was off balance, both physically and mentally. He had never fought someone who used his strength against him. The fight continued, but now Jake was setting the pace. Every time Nightbane tried to use his superior power, Jake found a way to redirect it. When the general swung his sword, Jake made sure it hit walls or floors instead of him. When Nightbane charged, Jake stepped aside and helped him crash into things. Finally, Nightbane made a mistake. Frustrated and angry, he put everything into one final attack. Jake dropped flat to the ground and the general's sword passed over him. Before Nightbane could recover, Jake swept his legs, sending the massive Zephyrian crashing down. Jake's sword point was at Nightbane's throat before the general could get up. Yield, Jake said quietly. Nightbane stared up at him with those burning red eyes. Impossible. You cannot have defeated me. I didn't defeat you, Jake said. You defeated yourself. Your anger made you sloppy. For a long moment, the throne room was silent except for both fighters breathing heavily. Then Nightbane began to laugh. Remarkable, he said. You fight like no warrior I have ever faced. There is no honor in your methods, yet there is wisdom. He looked at his sister, the Queen. Perhaps I have been wrong about humans. Jake helped Nightbane to his feet. We're not perfect. We make lots of mistakes, but we try to do better. Nightbane nodded slowly. I concede this rebellion. The Queen may rule as she sees fit. He looked at Jake with something like respect. And humanity may live in peace. The Civil War ended as quickly as it had begun. Nightbane's soldiers laid down their weapons when their commander surrendered. The rebel ships retreated and order was restored to Ethros. Later, in the quiet of the throne room, Queen Lyrelei made Jake an offer that would change everything. Jake Morrison, she said formally, you have proven yourself beyond any doubt. I offer you a choice. You may return to Earth as our official ambassador, carrying with you gifts of technology and knowledge that will advance your species by centuries. Or you may remain here as Prince Kira's guardian and help guide the next generation of Zephyrian leadership. Jake looked at Kira, who was trying not to cry. What do you want me to do? I want you to be happy, Kira said. You've done so much for me, for all of us. You should choose what makes you happy. Jake thought about his old life on the cargo ship, flying the same routes and delivering the same supplies. Then he thought about the amazing things he had seen on Ethros, the friendship he had built with Kira, and the chance to help two species understand each other. I'll go back to Earth, he said finally, but not forever. I want to set up proper diplomatic relations between our peoples. I want humans and Zephyrians to be real allies, not just neighbors who don't fight. Queen Lyrelei smiled. An excellent choice. You will have a ship capable of traveling between our worlds quickly. You will speak for both our species. And, Kira added excitedly, I can visit Earth and see where you come from. Jake laughed and hugged the young prince. I'd like that very much. As Jake prepared to leave Ethros for the first time in almost a year, he looked back at the crystal palace floating in its alien sky. He had come here as a prisoner, but he was leaving as a bridge between two worlds. The cargo ship captain who had rescued a dying alien child could never have imagined he would become the first human ambassador to an interstellar empire. But then again, that was the thing about humans.